Some info on international internships, which is really cool. I know they're not very easy to come by, so it'll be really informative. So keep your eyes and ears to Ryan for the next hour or so.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. It's nice to meet you all. My name's Ryan, and I did my internship in Colombia last year. I worked in a couple different hospitals. It was like one organization where my supervisor was the founder of the organization, and he's basically started hospital music therapy in Colombia. He's Austrian, but married a Colombian woman, and so he was doing lots of stuff in other countries in the world, but then now he's basically doing awesome things in Colombia. And I'll get more into that in my presentation. So let's begin. All right, so first a little about me. I'm also a yoga teacher, and I'm originally from Arizona. I'm like, oh, we got the feedback.
I'll be coming out with wrapping up. Sorry.
Are we good?
Mute one of them.
Well, I've muted this one.
Take it easy on Mizuki.
She's so good. She does so much for us. Oh, wait.
Are we good? You're doing great, Mizuki. So yeah, this is just a fun, silly slide. I've been practicing yoga for over 10 years and teaching for over 5. I was in drum corps, that I'm second to the right, a little chunkier and a lot less hairy, but I've also had lots of funny other hairstyles in the past. Top right, and these two pictures are 2 of my favorite memories, both musical. So top right is Austin Samba School. It's a Brazilian style samba drumline and dance group. Austin has the biggest carnival outside of Brazil in the world, and the biggest indoor carnival in the world. So that was that. And this is the drums I played on at a little music festival in a small town of Ibagué, Colombia. I ended up in my first year living there, or my first 2 years, I was teaching English. This was before I studied at ASU, and I ended up in a little rock band. And we, like, to give you an idea of the type of music, we covered Bon Jovi and Whitesnake, so like 80s hard rock. And this is my wife and our dog, my 2 ladies of my life. We just got married a few weeks ago, so it's thank you. It's still fun to say wife. I've been saying fiance for 2.5 years. And quick side note, I'm also stoked on my wedding ring. It's got a little guitar string on it. And this bracelet is made out of guitar strings and bass guitar strings. I discovered these at Tempe Art Festival. There's a company called Retuned, and they make guitar string jewelry, so y'all should check them out. I have no connection to them other than I stumbled upon them, found my wedding ring, and a cool bracelet. Yeah, so that's a little about me. Here's the overview of the reason I came here to talk about international internships. So first, talk about language. Lots of other countries speak other languages. Finding internships abroad, and then once you find at least one opportunity, choosing and committing. Then financial concerns and safety concerns, and then logistics, preparation before you go, and then my recommendations and a little bit of time for questions at the end. So first, language. This is a funny shirt I just found online, but Colombia also, I've come across a lot of funny shirts that are like not correct English. So Colombia is a country where it's not super easy to get by if you don't have Spanish. Some places more than others, like Medellin is a lot more tourist friendly, and they have a subway or a above ground train, and there's signs that are in Spanish and English, but most places don't have English signs, and most people don't speak English very well. So if you are looking to go abroad, I don't want to, I'm starting with maybe like the more difficult things so that we can end on happy notes, but you gotta probably speak the language of the country that you're going to. That being said, there's infinite possibilities, and maybe there's a music therapist in some other country working with a small English speaking population, whether that be expats or who knows who might be in other countries that is doing music therapy. But generally speaking, if you want to work with the people of that country, I would assume you need to speak the language. Except there's places, I don't know, like Africa, everyone's super bilingual in most countries. And so like I think English would be fine in most countries there. And if you don't know any other languages and still want to have an experience abroad, there's other countries that speak English. Like Australia is pretty big on music therapy, and lots of other ones too. So how to find them? I'll go through some specific ideas, but basically my recommendation is just try to put your feelers out in as many places as possible. I ended up finding mine because I talked to someone who knew someone who did their internship in Colombia with the same supervisor that ended up being my supervisor. And I got in touch with him, then he put me in touch with the supervisor, and then it all worked out. But some ideas are talk to your people at ASU, like your professors, your TAs, and your fellow students. And think about sending emails when appropriate, or just like bringing it up in casual conversation. So maybe to your music therapy professors, you would write them an email saying you're thinking about doing internships in another country. If you have any like preferences, you could put those, ask if they have any connections or any ideas for you. But like if you're a percussion student like me and you're going to your drum set lesson, like you might not email your drum set teacher. You might just be like, hey, do you happen to know anyone in Colombia or something like that? You know, so just put it out there with everyone that you're cool with, and hopefully you'll get a lead or two. Other places to look are AMTA. Sure, drilling that to you, right? Okay, we don't need it. But LM, I don't even know the abbreviation. It's the Latin American Music Therapy Network, which is I discovered through AMTA, one of the national conferences. And I think I actually ended up finding my internship, that guy I mentioned, through that. And I'm part of a WhatsApp group chat for the Latin American Music Therapy Network. And I think that's where I just said like, hey, does anyone know any internships in Colombia? And that's where I got mine. The World Federation of Music Therapy is another resource. They have a website that I just found looking for just in preparation of this presentation. If you click on resources and then scroll down and click on regional information, there's 8 regions of the world and they each have a different liaison. The website also has all these links that say like fact book, music therapy in Italy, fact book, music therapy, and those links don't work. So don't get excited about that. But the liaisons might be good people to contact for the region and ask them some questions. Get creative with Google. So also just preparing for this, I was just seeing what I could find. I was like, Music Therapy Organization Africa. And there's the Music Therapy Association of Ghana, the Music Therapy Association of Nigeria. South Africa didn't say music therapy, it said South African National Arts Therapies Association. So just trying Google and like a few different Google searches. You could also do music therapy country name. You could do music therapist country name and see if you find any person that you could get in touch with. And then Facebook groups are actually really useful. I know Facebook is dying, but this is one of the things I think is still great about Facebook is the Facebook groups. And the ones listed here are the ones that I am in, but there's so many. If you just go on Facebook and type music therapy, I would say I can definitely recommend all of these: the Arizona Music Therapy Association, Music Therapy Leaders, Music Therapists Unite, exclamation point, Music Therapy Students / Interns Community, and the Music Therapy Spot. Yeah, so just again, like spreading your feelers out, and the more angles you take, the more chances you'll have of finding something. And I did say like we'll have questions at the end, but if anyone has a question, you can just raise your hand in the middle. But until then, we'll keep going. So choosing an internship. This was huge in my decision to do it because even though, oh, I forgot a little bit about my story, but I taught English in Colombia for 2 years before I decided to study music therapy. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I liked it, but I liked teaching, but I didn't love it. But I did love Colombia. So life brought me back to Arizona, and it turned out Arizona State had a pretty cool music therapy program. It had been on my mind for a while, so I decided to do it. Um, I had a previous bachelor's in advertising, and I did nothing with that because I went to school when I was 18, probably like most of y'all, and just changed my major a bunch of times and then graduated. And then I was like, I don't want to advertise, I want to be a teacher. And then, anyway, finally decided on music therapy. Couldn't use advertising to do the master's equivalency program. So I went back for my second bachelor's when I was 30, and took me an extra 3 years, but just like, you know, encouragement to y'all, like, don't stress too much about figuring out your entire life path right now. Yeah, like if it doesn't end up being what you do for the rest of your life, it's just your step for right now, and then you take the next step, and then you take the next step, and it's all good. So I'd wanted to go back to Colombia, whether it was when I retire or sooner. And when I was coming up on internship time, I was like, I wonder if I could do it abroad. And, asked Dr. Belgrave, she said, yes, it's possible. And then I had to find it. And I was open to all Spanish speaking countries because I love Latin American culture. But I found that one in Colombia. So anyway, as I mentioned, I found a guy who I think he went to UC Berkeley, and he did the internship a little bit before I ended up doing it. I did a Zoom call with him, and he told me all about it. He told me that most of his time was spent in the NICU. And I was like, okay, I'm the kind of person who, like, I'm not anti working with babies and children, but I'm also not like the super, like, loving parent kind of person either. But the wisdom that he gave me, that is one of the most important things I will tell y'all, is it's more important to choose an internship based on the supervisor than the population. And why is that? Because your population preferences might change. You might feel like really excited about working with a specific population. And then even if you've had a little experience with them, once you go into an internship, which is all full-time or almost full-time, you might realize you don't love it. And vice versa. What happened with this guy and with myself is we didn't feel excited about working with the babies in the NICU, but that ended up being something I absolutely loved. And it's like something I'm going to try and do once I get certified here. So your preferences can change. That being said, if you feel called to a certain population, definitely try to get an internship with that. There's nothing wrong with trying for that, but don't let that limit you if you feel like, oh, like babies, I don't know, or, unless there's like a hard no, I would say be open-minded about the population. The supervisor, though, that's who's going to help you grow into a music therapist, like from a student to a music therapist, and basically just give you the foundation you need to be a good music therapist with any population. And then in addition to that growth in the internship, they're going to be a good reference for you and a good person who can support you in the future. Like my supervisor, I told you, he created the music therapy program in Colombia, in hospitals in Colombia. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's kind of where I'm trying to go with some hospitals that don't have music therapy in Arizona. Not to jinx it, but we'll see. But he's a good resource for that. So try to find a supervisor that you think will help you grow, will help you learn, and that you admire and respect, and maybe is admired and respected in the music therapy community. If you vibe with them, that's a bonus, but it's not necessary. But yeah, just finding a good supervisor is more important than finding your perfect population, in my opinion. Safety. A lot of people are worried about safety when they travel to other countries. And unfortunately, Colombia is one of those countries that has like a super bad rap. And half the time I say Colombia, people are like, oh, isn't it super dangerous there? I will say that a lot of stigmas are not correct. Colombia's stigma is because of the Pablo Escobar era from the 1980s, and the country's gotten a lot better in the past 40 years. There is still danger and crime, but there's also danger and crime in places like Argentina and Mexico and pretty much everywhere in the world. There's danger and crime in the wrong part of Phoenix. So it's stigmas can be wrong. I think it's important to talk to people who have been there, and if possible, people who are from there. The more you can talk to, the better, because everyone has a different experience. Sometimes I feel like Colombians think their own country is more dangerous than it actually is, because I have this whole theory I could tell you about later, but I think the country as a whole was traumatized from that 1980s, like Pablo Escobar era. And so now, like, the kids are being raised like super scared of like every possible thing that could happen. And I'm like, it's not that bad. But certain things that you will learn if you talk to someone who's been there or talk to someone who's from there are like, you probably don't want to walk around on the street like this. Because if you're on a busy street, someone on a bicycle could go like that. That being said, I was stubborn about it and I did it all the time, and like no one did that to me. But to be safe, you just don't pull your phone out on the street and it's fine. You put your valuables in your front pockets when you're on the bus or the train, unless your front pockets are loose, and then you like keep a hand in your pocket. And if it's crowded, you have to have all your valuables in one pocket so that hand can be in there and you're still holding on. But like you figure out how to make it work. Because I got pickpocketed wearing loose, like my wallet was here, but it was shorts, it was a little bit loose, and I got pickpocketed. But I was also robbed in Argentina and in the middle of Buenos Aires. And you know, you say like, oh, I'm going to Buenos Aires, and no one's like, oh, isn't it so dangerous? Like, no. But like I got robbed in like one of the busiest streets of Buenos Aires twice. Yeah. And I could tell you that, but like there's this thing that some people do where they create this foul smelling liquid and throw it on you, and it's fake bird poop. And then they have this whole elaborate thing of like how they rob you by making you think you got pooped on. And that was one of them. The other one was before I learned that if you have a backpack, you should wear it on your front. And so like they just swiped it open, took my iPod. Remember those? iPod. Like one of the newer, like one of the last iPods.
Classic, or was it like a
Classic?
Oh,
Yeah. No. Yeah. It was great. But I still got another one after that, and it's like my treasured relic of music. I know. And yeah, so as long as you're prepared and cautious, you'll be okay. Like another example, if it's late at night and you're out at a bar with some friends, and then your house is only a 5-minute walk away, but you have to walk home by yourself, like just get a taxi, you know? So little things like that, just being cautious, but you can be safe anywhere if you are prepared and cautious. Financial concerns. So I think like most internships here, I assume, I don't know for sure, but I think most internships abroad are likely unpaid. That being said, there might be different perspectives that you haven't thought about, like I hadn't. In my case, unpaid was lucky. Why? Because the hospital I worked at was a hospital that worked with a university in Colombia. And so it was like built for students to do their internships there. And if you're a Colombian student doing your internship there, you're paying a full semester's tuition. So me getting to do it for free was actually like really good, and everyone was jealous of me. And they also gave me lunch, which is the biggest meal in Colombia. So that was like a big deal. So internships are probably unpaid, but the cost of living is probably less than in the US. So if you need help, you can look for scholarships. I did not do that, and I wish I had. But you know, it's gonna take an hour or two per scholarship.
What about a visa? Do you need a work visa?
That depends on the country. That was something I'll get into into logistics. No, but no, but I don't even mention visa specifically, so thank you for reminding me. It depends on the country, but probably yes. But hopefully your internship, either supervisor or site, will help you make that happen. Yeah, so scholarships, like, they're kind of a hassle because you have to like write an essay or whatever and get some stuff together. But at the end of the day, like, you're already doing a lot of busy work. Like, what's another hour if it wins you maybe $1,000 or I don't know what else. And if you don't get it, like, I don't know, sucks, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So one last thing, if you go abroad and you're doing your internship and you feel like you want to earn some money and you have a few extra hours that you would like to earn some money, you can teach English online. My wife did this for a while, and I did this for a little bit after my internship before we moved back here. And both of these, you only make about $10 to $11 an hour. So in the US, it sucks. But abroad, the dollar stretches a long way in many countries, including Colombia. So like making $10 an hour in Colombia is pretty good. Cambly's the one that I've done, and it's super easy to sign up and get started and get some students and hopefully get some regulars. But you can either get regulars that schedule you regularly, or you can just go on and get whoever calls you in the moment. But you create your hours. You can work as many or as few hours as you'd like per week. So it's a really good opportunity to make money if you're abroad. VIP Kid is pretty similar, just like a little bit more formal in terms of they require you to have a more formal application. You have to at least seem like you're a teacher or have some sort of teaching experience. But I have a few friends who've done that, including my wife. So anyone who's interested in either of those, if you want more information or like advice about those, let me know. And I think that was it for that one. Logistics. So part of this first point is the visa. There might be lots of paperwork, trainings, and emails, and it kind of sucks, but it's worth it. If you feel called to go abroad, like, you're gonna want to do the tedious paperwork to make it work out, because in the moment I was like, this is ridiculous what I'm having to do just to get a visa, and 100% worth it. So be on top of email communication, because you'll probably have to talk to someone at ASU, if not like more than one person at ASU, your supervisor, and then like me, I was working for a hospital, so I had to be in touch with someone from the hospital, actually more than one person from the hospital. So just trying to be on top of email communication is good. And that being said, practicing patience. And I'll talk a little bit more about cultural differences on the next slide, but a lot of other countries in the world don't prioritize fast responses as much as we do here. So that's just one example of patience. Another example is that a lot of people don't do things at the level that we feel like is efficient and professional. And that's just kind of the norm. So there's no like shade or disrespect to anyone else. Like, that's just the cultural norm, is like things are going to be a little more difficult. My most difficult memory was when I was working with the hospital and they needed all this information from me. And then there was a form that had like a bunch of mistakes on it. So I had to like correct the mistakes, and I tried to give it out as like detailed and easy to understand as I could, like copy pasted, and then like the bold was what needed to be changed. And then they sent it back to me, and like some of the mistakes weren't fixed. So I was just like, what do I do? Just tell you again, like, that it's still wrong? So patience is important. And then on that note, getting what you need from people, try to make it as easy as possible for them. So it doesn't always work exactly as you'd like. Just like I said, I thought I was making it easy for them, and it still didn't work out. But if you're, for example, like needing a written statement, some sort of letter or something, instead of saying, hey, can you send me a written statement that says how many hours I need and you know, like that ASU has approved this internship, say, like draft the little statement and then say, hey, I wrote this up because I need you to like sign off on this for my supervisor. Can you please look over it, fill in the missing information and sign off on it? And then like the person only has to copy paste, you know? So make it easy for the other person. That's a good lesson to use in jobs and everywhere in life. Just like don't make them work and they'll be appreciative, hopefully, and it'll get done faster. So before you go, there's tons of preparation that you can do. But I also would encourage you to not stress because you'll be fine. So cultural humility, have y'all heard about that at all? I remember I learned about that, I think at a conference more than a class, but you learn about it. It's like we're never gonna be able to learn everything we need to know about another culture. And we don't even know everything we need to know about our culture. Like someone from our like generation, location, demographic back, like everything could be the same and still have lots of differences. But you should study and learn as much as you can about the culture you're going to go to, but still never assume. So something really good that I learned working in the hospitals is, and I think we touched on it in class too, is like we try to use the preferred music of the patient whenever possible and whenever appropriate. If we want to suggest something, then we ask them if that's okay. And if they're unconscious or unable to respond and tell us, we don't assume, because even though you can assume like people in hospice here probably like Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, Doris Day, and Johnny Cash, like someone might have had a traumatic experience with the Beatles. And so if they're not able to tell you, then you start playing the Beatles, like they could have a really bad reaction. So you never assume. If you can't get confirmation, then we just usually do some sort of instrumental music. It's not an actual song. And we improvise lyrics, very simple, like, you know, positive words or just the person's name. But that being said, it's good to know, like, if you're going to work in hospice, you should probably build up some of that rep that's going to be commonly used. And a really good one to learn is social norms. I lost my notes in this one, but I remember a couple of them. So one in Colombia that I learned when I was teaching English. I was in a room, I was working, and there's this room where it's kind of like an office space, but the desks are along the outside and the computers are facing the wall. And there's some lockers here. So imagine like all of you were just facing the opposite direction. And there's the lockers here where I come in and put my stuff. In Colombia, you're expected whenever you enter a room to say hi to every single person in the room. And or at least like hi to the collective group. But I didn't know that. And I'm in here like putting my stuff away. And then like I'm about to walk off and like no one was even looking at me. They were all like working by themselves on the computer or like one-on-one conversations. Someone like peeks over and sees me like, Ryan, you're not gonna say hi? And I'm like, oh well, it just y'all seemed like busy. And they're like, yeah, you still say hi though. And I'm like, okay, sorry, hi, good morning. So I learned that like even if everyone's busy and like no one even looks up at me, I say like buenos dias, and then everyone just like looks and says buenos dias and then continues on their conversations. So social norms you can learn. Another funny one in Colombia, you're gonna laugh at me, I don't care. You don't point at things with your finger, you point by pursing your lips and pointing with your lips. So you're like, hey, can you grab me that thing over there? Like, hey, what about that guitar? I'm not joking, that's how they do it. I picked up on it, and now I accidentally do it sometimes here, and people think I'm crazy. But it's fine. Like, and then so that's like the cultural aspect, the knowledge and skills, the music therapy, things that you can prepare for, lots of rep, especially in another country, you know, like here, I realized there's so many songs that even if it's not music I listen to, it's just music that's so popular, like I kind of know it, so I could learn a song, like I could learn a Frank Sinatra or a Beatles song like pretty quickly because it's vaguely familiar at least. But lots of that music in other countries you've like never heard before. So it's like learning a song you've never heard in your life. So trying to expose yourself to some of the music before you go would be beneficial. And like, so I said prepare as much as possible, but without stressing because it will all work out in the end. So if I had like leveled up my guitar skills a little bit more, I could have advanced even more in my internship because my supervisor is an incredible guitar player and he was trying to like drop all this crazy music theory stuff about doing all this fancy stuff on guitar, and I was like, slow down. And so then he realized like I wasn't at that level, and I still had a really amazing internship. I still ended up working shifts all by myself in the hospital with actual patients, like critical status babies and children. And so I did fine, but like I could have excelled even more on guitar. So everything is perfect, whether you like prepare more or less, but just prepare without stressing too much. And so in sum, my recommendation is that if you're feeling called, go for it. Like try as hard as you can if you're feeling called to make it work. Hopefully the ideas I gave you for finding one and for making it work financially are able to help you. And then if you speak Spanish and are interested in Colombia, highly recommend my internship and my supervisor, which the company is called Sono Musicoterapia, and the guy I mentioned, my supervisor, Mark Ettenberger. If you want to get in touch with him, I'd be happy to connect you, and just let me know. So I think that's it. Now, if anyone has any preguntas.
Yeah, so before you started your internship, like how long were you learning Spanish? And then also like how comfortable were you when you went to go do your
Thank you. That's something I forgot to say. I started learning Spanish back in middle school and took the high school classes and a couple in college, but all of those never prepared me to live in another country. I mentioned Buenos Aires, so I spent a semester abroad while I was at San Diego State, which was back in like 2010, 2011, you know, era of the iPod. I spent 4 months in Argentina, and that's where my Spanish went from like I'm pretty good at like passing the classes in university to I can have a conversation with a local here. Funny story though, like that being said, I remember towards the end of my time there, I went on a tour and we were in this guy's car. The tour guide was driving, and I ended up having a 2 hour conversation with him. He's from Argentina in Spanish. And so that's when I was like, yes, I made it. I am fluent. And then I went to visit a friend in Venezuela and I didn't understand anyone in Venezuela. So it's super tough, but living in the country is the best way to get good, because you're forced to learn and your mind absorbs things that you don't realize it's absorbing, like me pointing at stuff with my lips. Like I didn't make a conscious decision to do that, but like, and I would all of a sudden start saying words that I was like, I never actually studied this word. It just like absorbed, you know? And so, yeah, like Argentina got me conversational, but it was still tough depending on the country. Colombia's a pretty neutral Spanish, like Venezuelans speak a little faster. It's like a similar accent, but like faster and more slurred a little bit. So Colombia's a pretty good neutral one. And like, yeah, when I went there, I was back to like, okay, I can have conversations, but I have to ask the person to slow down or repeat a lot. And then after being there for 2 years teaching English, I was super good. And then after being here for 3 years studying music therapy, I was not that good again. So when I moved back there and I went, this is another thing I meant to mention in the preparation. I could have prepared my Spanish better because in hospitals, the acoustics are terrible. Like it's everything's like super echoey, just like tile and glass and squares, and it's super echoey. Everyone is still wearing a mask, so everything was super muffled. And then doctors tend to speak quickly, and they're using vocabulary I've never heard in my life. So I couldn't have practiced a lot of those things, except maybe the vocabulary I could have studied a little bit more. That being said, it took me a couple of months before I was like not stressing about just understanding the Spanish in my internship. And then I took off and I was fine and it was all good. Yeah.
Do you feel like just like, because you took your board certification here, right?
I didn't. I'm taking it hopefully like in a couple weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
you feel good prepared for it still, even though you didn't have the experience here.
That's a good question. The only reason I'll say yes is because I took a practice board exam, and I passed.
Yeah.
There's 130 questions. Passing, I think, is 95. It's either 90 or 95, but I think it's 95, and I got 102. So I didn't pass it like by far, but I passed it enough. Just gonna study a little bit more and then just go for it because I feel like if that's what I would recommend. And someone recommended the MTSO president before me, Emmy. I don't know if any of y'all know Emmy. She was, yeah. She worked at an MTSA for a while. She told me just take a practice exam. While you're taking it, make sure you note the ones that you guessed on, and then score yourself. And then just study the questions that you guessed on and the questions that you got wrong. And like it's this big scary thing, but some people fail it 3 or 4 times, but a lot of people pass it the first time. So try to like not build it up as to be too scary in your mind. At least that's what I'm doing. I'll let you know how it goes in a couple weeks.
How long did it take for you to like search for an internship, and then after you found your supervisor to open and like start your internship?
It took me a while, but that's because I was kind of lagging and like slow playing it. I actually asked a few times if I could push it back. Like when I can't remember exactly, but when I talked to my supervisor, we basically agreed on a potential start date, and that was gonna be, I would guess, like from that conversation where he said like, "You're welcome to come if you want to." That was probably in like June or July, and then he was probably like, "You can come in January, I think." So about 6 months, because the visa was a whole process. You want to buy flights not 6 months in advance, but like also not like next week, and like prepare like all the preparation and stuff. So yeah, probably I would say if you wanted to rush it, you could try to do it in 3 months, but like any less than that would be pretty crazy. And mine ended up being much longer because I just dragged it out, but that was like my decision, not his or the process.
How did it take to get your visa?
It was that was more like tedious of collecting all the required documents and things that I needed and submitting them all, and then like challenges with the website. But at the end of the day, I think it only took a couple weeks to actually yeah, like I submitted it and then got it back in a couple weeks.
Is that just like an extended stay visa, or was that a work visa?
Mine was a student visa.
So you did qualify first.
Yeah. Actually, now that we're talking about it, I remember that was like one of the hardest things was figuring out like what visa I was supposed to do, because there were like a couple that were like very similar but kind of different. And so I
Like,
just-
you're doing English teaching online, isn't that still technically, would that be working? Like, how does that?
I didn't mention that. You're just not gonna tell anyone that you're teaching English online. Um, because you work for a company that is, I think, from the US. But like, you don't have to report, like, that's not taxable income in Colombia. So people who work those jobs are just like bouncing all over the world. Like, some people do that full time and just like live abroad and teach English online.
I guess since you brought that up with that, did you, it might be a dumb question, did you have to know, like, were you also speaking Spanish while teaching English, or was it mostly?
There are no dumb questions. And no, you don't have to know any other languages to teach English on these websites. Yeah. Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. So and to add a little bit to the two, like I said, Cambly and VIP Kid. VIP Kid, I said, is a little more involved, like a little more like formal teaching. And most of your students are Chinese children. So if you don't love children, then that's going to be challenging. Cambly is awesome because there's Cambly regular and Cambly Kids. And I never signed up for Cambly Kids. My wife loves teaching the kids, even though she's not like that kind of person I mentioned. She loves teaching the kids online. I don't. I liked working with them in the hospital, but I don't love teaching them English online. So I ended up just finding a bunch of like people around the world who I just like made friends with, and then we just had conversations, but I would correct their English pretty much. There's other things, you know, Cambly has some classes or like courses where they basically give you like a slideshow that you go through, but you don't even have to look at the slideshow before you start. You just, it says like, this person wants to do this lesson today. And then you just go through it with them. Yeah, it's really convenient. Is there another question over there?
How did you navigate communication between like the international supervisor and like Dr. Belgrave or like the ASC professors?
Okay, good question, because my supervisor speaks English too. So he, like, I basically put him in touch with Dr. Belgrave, and then they were able to talk in English. I hadn't even thought about the possibility that maybe your supervisor speaks another language. In that case, you might want to do some three-way Zoom calls, or at least a three-way Zoom call where like you're the translator if necessary. Google Translate's like pretty good. But you also might want to, like, if it's just emails, maybe make sure everything's being CC'd to you so that you can make sure it's all making sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, not just language wise, but even just like during the internship, would you like check in with Dr. Belgrave every once in a while or like, no?
Yeah. Well, okay, two things. Before the internship, there were a few things where like they were supposed to be communicating, and then I was like waiting on things to get approved, and then that's what I said, like being on top of your emails and then sending those follow-ups, because I was like, a couple weeks have passed and you don't even, like, for follow-ups wait like 5 days or so. But I'm like, a couple weeks have passed, like what's going on? And it was like Dr. Belgrave said she didn't have a response from my supervisor on this one thing. But then he was like, I already responded, like, here's a screenshot of my response. And then she was like, oh, okay, like maybe it went to somewhere else or what, I don't know. So it's kind of just staying on top of it and like making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Follow-up emails are good. And then during the process, this is something else I wanted to share. I think it's Dr. Bell. Is she still director?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's her who makes the decision about this, but she basically said, okay, so while you're abroad, and I think this goes for even people in other cities in the US, I'm not sure, but like you basically have a check-in with her every so often. I chose to do mine 25 to 30 hours a week for 9 months. instead of 40 hours a week for 6 months, which I would also recommend if you can afford to live there that long, like the slower the better, because you're just going to absorb more. And so I had to check in with her every other month. Like we had a little Zoom call and she was basically like, how's it going? Like, and I was, I told her the goods and the bads, and then she gave me some ideas to support me on the challenges, and then that was it. Like it was super chill. And then at the end, like your supervisor just has to sign off and say like you completed your responsibilities, and he like you might have heard a lot of internships here would have like a project or two that you have to do on the side, and he also required that. Mine was a presentation that I gave at like a hospital conference, and then a little concert where I just like played in the lobby for like 45 minutes at the end of my internship. Yeah. All right. So if there's no more questions, don't worry because I have my contact information here. So thank you for your time. I know how busy and stressful student life is. And so let me know if there's any way I can support you, whether that's teaching English online, music therapy, internships abroad, or anything else you want to talk about. Like, I'm happy to be in touch and support in any way possible. Email, phone number, I don't care if you call or text me. And then I'm on Facebook, not that much, and I'm on Instagram a little more. I have a music and a yoga Instagram. As I mentioned, I'm a yoga teacher, so I'm more active on that one. But I'll get your message eventually if you send it there. If you need a faster response, text is better. And if you want to practice yoga, I teach every Wednesday at Riverview Park in Mesa. It's like 15 minutes down Rio Salado. 5:30 p.m. We get a super cool sunset, and it's donation based, so you pay what you feel called to pay.
I was like, where do you teach?
Yeah, right now it's just there, and I'm subbing a few classes in Gilbert at a new place called the Zen Den. So you can, yeah, get that information on Instagram or. And that's it. Thank you all.
Photo. with them
Sure.
for a
Yeah.
second. Okay, well, I'm gonna.
We'll be
stop
sending all this
this.
information out through email.
If
in case you missed it.
haven't shared that presentation with us.